Sorry, really got me.
That's actually a cover song, so...
Hey!
Come on! The dads are here.
Welcome to Retro Groove. Enjoy your voyage.
Howdy, and welcome to Retro Groove. I'm Adam.
And I'm Liam.
And this is a podcast where we talk about music that stands the test of time. Welcome to episode 14 of our second season of Retro Groove. Here, as always, with my pal Liam. Liam, what is up in your neck of the woods?
Well, I've got actually kind of a fun story that ties into this podcast and music and kind of came in handy recently. So
spill it.
have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons, Adam?
Believe it or not, I have never legit played an actual game or a campaign.
It's a bummer.
It is. I'm bummed out by that too.
We'll fix it someday.
For sure.
So my dad, I grew up where my dad used D&D. He was a special education teacher for middle school kids. And so he used D&D in the classroom for social issues.
That's awesome.
And then he brought it home for his teenage son and his teenage friends for their own social issues. So he fostered a bunch of our friend group into playing D&D, and we've played it throughout the years. And so fast forward to one of my buddies who is getting married in a few months, and he wanted to do a guy's getaway thing, and he found this Airbnb in Maryland. They were awesome. They're called Adventure Away, and you can basically like book yourself in this old manor. It was called Redwall.
No way.
And you live there for the weekend, and they hire a dungeon master to come in and run a game for you. Right?
That's nuts.
So far, nothing to do with music. Here we go. So the character that I chose to play is a bard. Bards are performers, right? Usually musically oriented. And what I decided to do, because I thought it would be fun, is have my bard unknowingly or unintentionally patched into another plane of existence for his inspiration. I thought of that movie called Yesterday, where like a guy wakes up and he remembers all the Beatles songs and nobody else does. You know, like
that's right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I was kind of taking a spin off of that, and I was like, well, maybe he can like tune into radio stations, you know? Mm-hmm. And so, dude, all of my spells and stuff were all like 80s, 90s, 2000s song lyrics. And so every time I cast a spell, like the way I set it up is the DM was just like, all right, so what do you say? And I started doing like Enter Sandman by Metallica to like cast like a beastly spell, or like Sleep Now in the Fire, and then like cast the thing or whatever. Dude, it was so fun. I busted out the Thong Song as a healing spell. Like,
oh no.
Yeah. It was super, super fun. But yeah, other than that, gearing up for some concerts. I got to see this band White Reaper that I love recently. I'm going to see Bob James and Talib Kweli soon, so I'll be able to report in on that next time.
Bucket list show, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Amazing.
And yeah, a couple things this summer, but I'll recap that when we get there. What about you? How are you doing?
Doing really well. We have defrosted from the deep freeze that we had
Nasty.
in Central Texas this past week. Yeah, it was pretty, wasn't as bad as it was a couple years ago. But we had power on and off a little bit, and, but we were kind of more prepared this time. Plenty of firewood, plenty of backstock of food and water and whatnot. So it was a little bit more an excuse to, kids were out of school, so we were all just hanging out and spending family time and playing games and whatnot. Gonna end up probably going to see the Beths here.
Nice.
Not too far off. I think it's next month. So looking forward to going to that with Dan. That should be pretty awesome.
Yeah,
missed
great.
it the last time they were around because we found out about the show the day of.
No.
So that didn't end up working out, but they're glad they came back to the States in support of their new album. So we're happy about that. Other than that, just happy to be more back in the swing of things and ready to keep pushing out content. I'm excited.
Yeah, man.
Excited about this episode.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun. We've been kind of bouncing some ideas around, and this one just stuck. Like, there are cover songs that I've loved over the years that I didn't know were cover songs. There are cover songs that, like, I knew were, and it was how I was then exposed to and became a fan of the original artist. There was a time recently, it's kind of funny. So I had this double disc album by Metallica called Garage Inc., and it was like a collection of like all these cover EPs and stuff that they'd rolled out over the years into one place. It was great. And there was this song called Lover Man on there, which I was like, such a weird freaking song. I mean, it's a scattershot of stuff on there, but it was such a weird song. And then my recent like discovery and rabbit hole of Nick Cave, I stumbled across the original version. I'm like, I know this one. Wait, I know this.
How do I know this?
This is from that Metallica album. And I'd never gone back to look to see who the original artist was on that one. I just knew it as the weird sixth track on that album. And now it's like this other layer of appreciation for an artist that I'm a fan of now and an artist I was a fan of then, all because Metallica was obviously and is obviously a fan of Nick Cave. So that's kind of cool too,
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I was honestly surprised at how many of these songs that came up that I even this day did not know were covers. I learned about covers today and yesterday doing the research for this episode that kind of surprised me. This was probably also, with as many episodes as we've done, this was the most fun research I've ever had to do.
Probably jump back and forth between the songs, right? Like you listen to the version and then the original version, right?
Yeah, so much fun going back and listening to some of these songs that I either haven't ever heard before or haven't heard in some of these songs decades. So yeah, lots of fun. Cannot wait to get into it. And we're gonna go or try to go mostly chronologically, just to give it a little bit of structure because we're playing this one a little loosey-goosey, which is generally how we like to do things, but some semblance of structure is helpful.
Yeah, we got a little roadmap here. Yeah, totally. I'll say the first caveat though, as we start off in the earlier era, you're talking about the 60s and by default the late 50s, is you bear in mind that you're coming out of an era at that point of songwriters and performers being distinctly different people.
Right.
And it being the structure of the music business up until then that the performers would enlist songwriters, would buy songs. A song could be sold to multiple people. It was kind of a messy situation. It always shocks me when an artist is a great performer, a great writer, a great musician. Like the musicianship is top notch. Like I don't know how so many of these artists today are so good at a million things at once.
It's insane.
Blows my mind. Yeah. Not to say that some of these artists back in the 60s weren't outstanding as well, but the songwriting, you see a lot of co-writing right now. Even when you're talking about like a Max Martin, who's like the man behind the biggest pop hits of the past 20-something years, a lot of those are co-writes that he sits down with Britney Spears or whatever, and they kind of work the thing out together. Right. That was not the normal structure back then.
No, you had songwriters, and that was their job.
Right.
And they would sell the song to whoever, and it could be recorded and released by any number of people, and it was just a lot more common back then. It was still a little bit kind of the wild, wild west from a legal standpoint.
Yeah.
But right now it's a lot more, the ownership is a lot more clear and a lot more tightly held, I think. So it seems to be a much bigger deal the further we get on in the timeline here when someone releases a cover song. I mean, back then it wasn't considered like, oh, they did a cover. It was just like, oh, they recorded this song.
Yeah, you didn't have the distribution to even necessarily know that something was a cover. You just knew that version of it because that's what got played on your local radio station, or that's what your record store got in,
Exactly.
Like which version? I think Louie Louie is right up here at the top, right?
That's the first one on our list here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple versions of that song. There's also like not really whole understanding of what's being said in the lyrics even of that song. It's talk about a mess. You're really starting off with like the biggest mess in all of this. It's like the FBI investigated this one, right? Yeah.
Yes, this was kind of a crazy story where so the song we're talking about is Louie Louie by the Kingsmen, and that's the version that most people know and have heard.
Right.
I don't know if you remember when it was that you first kind of came to be exposed to this song, but I remember the first time I heard this song was watching the movie Down Periscope.
Down Periscope.
Do you remember?
Adam, don't
Yes.
F with me right now. I was going to say the exact same thing. That's amazing.
Oh, man.
Dude.
So if for those of you that don't know what we're freaking out
You're
about.
the best. You're just the best.
That's why this works so well.
Oh my God. Down Periscope.
Down Periscope is a
Kelsey Grammer, right? Yeah.
goofy comedy with Kelsey Grammer, Rob Schneider. Oh my God, who else? It's kind of a William H. Macy is in it. Harlan Williams.
Weird misfits. Yeah.
Yes, it's just a really bonkers the kind of movie that you could get away with in the mid 90s that you couldn't really get away with anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's kind of about this rogue submarine crew that insists on using this very old diesel powered, like ancient submarine. And, the higher ups, they want to replace everything with the nuclear subs and everything. So they decide to agree to some war games. And if they can pass the test or whatever, then they can keep utilizing this old, rusty, half broken down diesel sub.
Yeah.
So one of the tricks that they employ in trying to fool the bigger, larger nuclear modern subs is they shut off all the engines and go up near the surface, and the entire crew starts in a drunken manner, acting drunk and singing Louie Louie by the Kingsmen.
Yeah. And then they're like intercepted and they're like, oh, that looks like a fishing ship or something.
Yeah,
like
a bunch
that,
of drunken sailors. And so they pass by and let them go. That was my first exposure to that song.
Exactly the same. I love that you did that. I was like sitting here, I'm like, well, mine is going to be pretty weird. So I don't know what he's about to throw at me.
No,
and it's the same freaking
there
thing.
It is.
It's so good. A sign of the times.
But the original song was
not by Kelsey Grammer, right?
No. Nope. Yeah. Or Rob Schneider or any of those guys. But it was originally recorded in 1957 by Richard Berry and the Pharaohs. The song is about a sailor coming home to his woman. And when the Kingsmen covered it, they did it in just a very like tongue-in-cheek, silly kind of way, to the extent that you really could not understand the lyrics. Like the lyrics are innocent enough if you listen to the original song, but it was so unintelligible, and they kind of had a little bit of a reputation that it sparked an investigation by the FBI into possible interstate trafficking of obscene material, because there were groups of people. This was pre-Satanic Panic, where they were playing records backwards and hearing satanic messages. Right. This was, we hear foul, obscene language in this song, and if you're trafficking this across state lines, that's a federal crime. So the FBI investigated it for 2 years and ultimately ruled that these lyrics are unintelligible at any speed or volume. That was like the culmination of their 2-year-long investigation into this song. So off to a weird start here today on our covers episode. I don't know what else to say about it.
It's been performed by the Grateful Dead. It's been performed by Bruce Springsteen. If you're talking about like which version we know as like the regular recorded, probably on the radio or whatever, the Kingsman's the one, but we've probably seen it live at a concert or something at some point in our lives. I mean, it is a very widely covered song that's just a fun, jaunty thing to do, to throw into your sets. So Twist and Shout is on here, and that's another interesting one where it's like, it's a Phil Medley penned song. Mm-hmm. The Isley Brothers were the ones who kind of had success with it. But the Beatles, I mean, when you talk about Twist and Shout, you think of the Beatles for the most part. I think most people would associate that song with them. Yeah, it was such a big moment. But it's weird when you look at the dates there. I mean, like the Isleys, it was 62. I think it was like May of 62, and not 7 months later is the Beatles
early
version
63.
of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's another one of those things where it's like, I think it depends on, if you were listening to radio in the right spot, then maybe the Isley Brothers version was the one that you knew. Yeah. I think if you were watching TV, you probably got exposed to the Beatles version. But yeah, it's kind of crazy that that's not just it's not a Lennon McCartney penned song. Although when you listen to it, it doesn't really feel like it. Like once you get to know, and once they become the songwriters that we know and love now, like you can look back and you can see like it's not really, it doesn't have their fingerprints on it as much.
No, they did make it their own, but in more of a, we're worshiping Little Richard and, the early rock, that's who they're channeling, because those were their idols. Yeah. Chuck Berry and all of that. So they did it in that kind of style because that's who early on in the early 60s, that's who they were trying to emulate before they, gained the confidence to be more themselves. And we love all facets of the Beatles from their early beginnings forward. This is just another part of their growth as musicians, and it's a really fun listen. But it's like, gosh, I couldn't even imagine how many different artists recorded or performed different versions of Twist and Shout. It's like probably one of, if not the most popular rock song of this era. Yeah. There's an entire dance, the twist that was crossing, different songs would still be about doing the twist. How many songs are there about doing the twist?
There's a bunch. I mean, Chubby Checker is probably going to want to have a word with you at some point, but we got to get Chubby in there. But yeah, no, Twist and Shout is, anything that got you gyrating at that time.
There you go.
Another one, and it won't be his only appearance on this list, but Respect, Respect is probably best associated with Aretha Franklin's. First time I heard that song. It's what I knew of that song. But ultimately was written and recorded and released by Otis Redding 2 years before that. You know, I think I don't think that this wasn't a situation where it was penned by somebody and shopped around. I think that the story goes that Aretha had heard this, and she had worked with a bunch of similar musicians that had worked with Otis at the time, and just kind of cross-pollinated, and they felt like her voice would lend itself well, and she could also like kind of reframe the story of what it was, you know, like it really having a woman's voice on that song and the way that she carries it kind of flips the whole script of what that is, you know, and it redefines the song.
Definitely.
And
especially at this time, like in this era, like in the 60s, it was like
67.
Still pretty controversial to do something like that. And, you know, to have a woman demanding respect. And this is also kind of the first in what's going to be a long line of women covering songs that were originally written and recorded by men that just take it up to a completely another level. And so I'm all here for that for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that song. I have a great memory, and it's got to be on video somewhere if the VHS tape isn't corrupted by now. But my younger sister just killing it with a version of Aretha Franklin's Respect at like a high school lip sync. It's so good, and she just kills it. And I'll always cherish that memory. I hope I can find that video someday, but the fear is it's probably on a VHS tape that's been, you know, demagnetized for
at this point,
sitting in a basement or a storage unit for years and years. But that's where a lot of my memories ended up, is just being demagnetized on a VHS tape somewhere. But yeah, that's an amazing one. And we'll have plenty more, you know, stories of women taking a song that a man recorded and just rocking the hell out of it.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Elvis Costello for a second.
Yeah, please. I don't know this song.
So, it's one of my favorite songs. So what's so funny about Peace, Love, and Understanding? If you've seen the movie Lost in Translation, you've seen Bill Murray doing an incredible karaoke version of it.
Oh, okay.
And I think he's karaokeing the Elvis Costello version. And most people know it as an Elvis Costello song, but this is one that surprised me. I just learned that this was a cover song this past week. It was originally written by Nick Lowe and released under the name of his band Brinsley Schwartz in 1974. And Elvis Costello, it didn't really go anywhere major. Elvis Costello took it 4 years later, and it's like one of his biggest hits. That's always so weird to me to see something like that and they're not terribly different. It's not like Elvis Costello took it and like did something entirely new and different with it. He just kind of does it in the Elvis Costello way. And it was a hit. It was a major hit. So that's another weird phenomenon that we'll kind of see repeated a few times, where the original and the cover are not that different, and they're not that spaced far apart, you know, chronologically, but the second one just blows up. And it's always interesting to me, like, you got to think, okay, so what were the circumstances? Like, was it just not marketed well? Did it not make radio? Did the other artist or the second artist have more exposure? It's like, who knows?
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is we don't know the behind the scenes stuff there, but it's, I think it often is that the secondary performer is approaching the initial and saying, hey, I'd like to take an interpretation of this. But we will see instances where the original person is going to the secondary performer and saying, hey, you know, I've got this song. I wonder, you know, I had my run with it, with this group, with this recording at this time, with this label. Didn't really stick, but maybe you could do something you could do something of it, you know. I would
Could
be
be.
shocked, like knowing who Nick Lowe is and Elvis Costello, like they were really running in very similar circles, especially
Yeah.
at that time. I'd be shocked if there wasn't some sort of collaborative thing there where, you know, that Elvis reached out and said he wanted to do it or something to that effect.
Yeah, and I could see being the original artist, and if it's kind of run its course for you, maybe at least as a songwriter, giving the song another shot at exposure, and maybe even, you know, another or greater chance of getting some royalty checks out of it if if that's the way that things worked back then. And but I can definitely see that being.
Oh, wait. So check this out. So I'm just looking at
plot
liner
twist.
notes. I'm looking at liner notes here. Elvis Costello, third album in 79, produced by Nick Lowe.
Oh,
So these guys were like in it. They
Interesting.
were, yeah.
The plot
interesting.
thickens.
Yeah, so that sounds like Elvis might have been a Nick fan, or like asked Nick to collaborate with him. You know, I feel like that's how you usually get someone like that in a production seat. And then maybe he said, you know, I really like that song you guys put out a few years ago. Might I take a stab at it, kind of thing. I'm not putting words in Elvis Costello's mouth, but it seems like that kind of thing. Yeah,
Could be.
wow, look at that. Mysteries uncovered.
plot twist. I like it. I like it quite a bit.
Yeah.
So here's another one that was a 1974 original, and the cover came out just 4 years later in 78. So, and honestly, this is another one that I didn't know was a cover song until starting to do the research for this episode. But I don't know about you. I'm a big Talking Heads fan. And the song Take Me to the River was originally released by Al Green.
Wow. Yeah, I
I didn't know that.
Mm-mm.
So that was one of the
I
shocker.
can hear it. Like when you
Yeah.
say it and you run it through your head, the bones are 100% there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, and interestingly enough, because you would think the Talking Heads would take it and just make it super weird, but this is one that it's not that big of a departure from the original.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to hear. Like I went and listened to the Al Green version. I was like, oh man, this is so good. And then to immediately go and listen to the Talking Heads performing it, it's like, oh man, they got it though. Like they got the groove, they got what makes the song good, and they just like picked up the ball that Al Green passed and they just ran with it.
Yeah.
So
Well, so I don't think we need to do this with each of these, and so I'm not going to ask you to right now. Like
That's
I go
fine.
back to Aretha Franklin and Otis Redding for respect, and I think I'm going to go with the Aretha version. Like if I'm going to go listen to one, I'm probably going to stick with the Aretha version there.
oh yeah, for
Now
sure.
I've got to go listen to both the Elvis and Nick versions of Peace, Love, and Understanding because I'm not super familiar with either of them. So now I got to figure out which one's mine, you know?
Yeah.
But
I think ultimately the Elvis Costello version is more interesting to listen
it?
to. And I'd probably say the same thing about the Talking Heads version of Take Me to the River. I mean, but it's, you know, obviously it's hard to compete with Al Green, but you know, there's better Al Green songs done by Al Green.
yeah.
But this particular song, I think the Talking Heads take it. But I'm a huge Talking Heads fan, so I'm biased.
All right.
I'm not going to try to be unbiased today.
Yeah.
I spend so many of these episodes that we record being as unbiased as possible. And today I'm not doing it. I'm just going with my favorite off the bat.
Yeah. No, that's fine. So the next one we got is one that I was also surprised about. I always thought that I Fought the Law was a Clash original. It feels
Just sounds like it.
Yeah, it feels like that punk, like it's exactly what I associate with their sound.
Totally.
You know? And so to find out that it was actually a cover of something from 1960.
Yes. The original version
by the Bobby Fuller 4.
Well, right. So Sonny Curtis wrote it. He was in
The Crickets.
Buddy Holly's group.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So, and it's so funny when you think about it that way. You would think it was, a punk anthem or something that came from like the rocksteady or reggae scene, but it was original. Like if you go back and listen to the original version by the Crickets, I mean, it's like it's the
I stole
most
a piece of gum.
That's kind of what it sounds like. And you look at the guys and they're just like the super clean cut, like, Kingston Trio looking dudes. And you're like, what are you, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
and in fact, the original lyric, I was listening to it earlier today, instead of, it's something like robbing people. He doesn't say six gun. He says zip gun. And I'm like, oh, you probably couldn't say that in 1960. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, or unless now I'm like, wait, does the Clash version also say zip gun? And I've just been mishearing it all these years.
Maybe
so I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. Maybe. But this is one. So you got a decent gap of time, almost 20 years.
Yeah. That's a big one.
No, like, collab with the originator. I mean, Bobby Fuller died right after this came out. So that was the end of Bobby and his Fuller 4.
Okay.
No, the Clash
version does say six gun. So I'm off the hook there.
There you go. The Clash were working on an album in the States and went into a laundromat, I think it was, or something like that. Or no, went into the studio. There's a jukebox in the studio and a bunch of old classic records. And that one came on and it just stuck. Like, I think that they, in their like you said, rocksteady kind of reggae tinted punk nature, heard what they could twist into the anthem like that. Again, I feel like it's one of the most defining things that the Clash gave to us is that. And like, I still can't believe that it's a cover.
It's wild. I mean, they definitely put their signature on it. They clashed it up really, really well. Yeah. It's another interesting thing too, is listening to that original 1960 version of the song, that part where he talks about robbing people with the six gun, the drums go crack, 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 like making it sound like a gun. That's in the original 1960 version too.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of crazy to hear those types of similarities, but like they turned it into a punk anthem.
I gotta go,
which is fantastic. But yeah, one of my favorite Clash songs, and I love the Clash, so that's saying a lot. There's a lot of Clash songs that I really love, but that one, there's just something about just like, breaking the speed limit, blasting that song in the car. It's just fantastic. It's a life experience. So that's the Clash. We're getting into the 80s now, and things start to get weird.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple on this list that are really strange. So I'm not super familiar with The Tide Is High.
But you're the Blondie fan.
I like Blondie. I don't know this song that well. Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird. Okay, I never knew. This is another one that I didn't know was a cover until this weekend. Yeah. But it makes sense because it's a song that really kind of sticks out like a sore thumb in the Blondie catalog. Yeah. It's just kind of straight up, almost a very like whitewashed reggae style. It's very like sing-songy and it doesn't really have any of that edge that the Blondie catalog is known for. It's just very like almost, I don't want to go so far as calling it like an lounge or elevator music type of feel to it, but it's very clean and sparkly sounding. And come to find out this past weekend that originally it was done in 1966 by a rocksteady group called the Paragons. And you go back and listen to the original and it's not that big of a departure. Yeah. It's very similar. which is really interesting. You would think that they would put like some kind of punk edge to it, or, you know, Debbie Harry can come out with a rap verse or something. Like you, you would think they'd do something different with it.
Yeah, I chalk that up to Chris Stein. I mean, I feel like he's the one in that band who has this like crazy record collector mentality, and he's just like he was influenced by so much stuff, and he would bring everything to the table and then run it through the filter of Debbie and Clem. And so my gut says that this dude heard it somewhere and was just like, we can take this and reinvent it or whatever. I'd have to go back and listen to the original version, because I can hear this song in my head, kind of, but I feel like I don't have it enough in my head. I'd need to go hear the Paragons version and then compare it back. But
yeah, that's my only takeaway. Really, is it's really not that big of a departure. It's like, you know, the Clash took I Fought the Law, and they freaking clashed it up.
Yeah.
you would think that they would do something like, you know, there's no distorted guitars in Blondie version of The Tide is High. There's not much of anything, but a very, very like it's almost a Jimmy Buffett feel to it.
Right.
Which sounds weird to say, but it really does. If you listen to it, you'll hear what I'm talking about.
Huh.
It's like reggae done by a white guy kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
So, but it wasn't, I mean, we have a female singer, right? I'm guessing the Paragons were
a male singer initially.
A guy group, but it really didn't twist the song at all.
Other than changing, she says, I'm not the kind of girl instead of I'm not the kind of man. But other than that, no, there's not really a unique take on it necessarily. It's just weird. You'd think they would do something fun with it. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? Still a good song.
Yeah, for sure. This one, I was aware of that it was a cover. I didn't know, or I'd never heard the original version, talking about Tainted Love, which is a huge 80s hit.
Huge 80s anthem.
By a band called Soft Cell, and I think it winds up being their only big hit. They might have had one other thing, but yeah, the original version is another song pulled out of the 60s by this artist, Gloria Jones. And, you know, in the 80s, you had a fair amount of those alt artists that were digging back through the stacks, kind of having this appreciation for some of the soul and predominant singers back in the day. Story goes that they had considered doing a Frankie Valli song instead, and they actually do ultimately go and do a cover of that years later. But for this one, they fell in love with this song, and this one they definitely, I mean, it becomes a synth pop song, you know?
Yeah. Oh, they definitely new waved it up a lot.
Yeah.
Very, very much not like the original. In a wonderful way. They really make it their own, and it sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I first heard the song watching the Coneheads movie. Did you see?
Oh my God!
Did you see that?
That's amazing. I love
Dan
these movie
Aykroyd
references you're going to throw at me tonight.
That's the first time I heard the song. So
that's great.
You know, that's kind of the way a lot of us were exposed to new music early on in life, in a lot of ways. But it's another kind of this theme in the 80s of going back like 15 to 20 years and pulling songs from the 60s and the 70s to cover. And even with stuff that we obviously knew were covers, like You Really Got Me by Van Halen, and Tiffany doing I Think We're Alone Now and stuff like that. So, but this is such a cool reimagining of the song, at least sonically. And that's what I really enjoy. Like, I love when an artist takes a song that they're going to cover and they really, really make it their own. Yeah. That's really interesting to me. And I just love that, because I feel like I would have a hard time doing that. I feel like I would just play the original as close to how I'm used to it sounding in my head as possible. Yeah. So I think it takes a special kind of special kind of musical talent to take an existing song that's already completely laid out front to back and make it entirely different, make it your own, and make it sound unique to the point that people are surprised that it's a cover song.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, I think it still ended up being a one-hit wonder situation for Soft Cell.
Yeah. So next up is Joan Jett. Joan Jett, yeah. Joan Jett's an interesting one, man. Like, I definitely heard that I Love Rock and Roll was a cover a while back. I didn't realize how much of her first two albums, Bad Reputation and I Love Rock and Roll, are covers. I mean, she wrote a bunch of songs on those things, for sure. Bad Reputation being just a banger. But yeah, there's, I mean, Do You Want to Touch Me? You Don't Own Me, Shout. There's a version of Louie Louie, although that might have just been a deluxe. Crimson and Clover. I mean, there's a lot of throwback covers on here. But yeah, so I Love Rock and Roll was recorded by a band called Arrows.
The Arrows.
Who were apparently pretty popular at the time because they had a TV series called Arrows, and Joan Jett saw them do this song on there. She was touring with the Runaways in the 70s, saw this performance, loved the song, and brought it back and decided to make it her own. I think sonically it sounds pretty different. I mean, pretty similar.
It does.
I think they're both just like, you know, banger with a little glitzy kind of rock. But she, having her be the kind of alpha voice in this is the departure for me. You know, like the song kind of takes on a whole different swagger having someone like her fronting the conversation.
Yeah, 100%. As similar as they are, at least sonically, if you remove the voice from it, the Arrows version is just kind of, I would say, maybe kind of forgettable. There's nothing like terribly special about it, even though it's essentially the same song. But when you've got Joan Jett singing it, it kind of takes on a new life. There's also something about a female singing it and the fact that it does have that. I mean, by then most of us were probably pretty tired of the like snarly, you know, male voice. So to have to start to have some female rock and roll voices doing stuff like this was just a breath of fresh air. Yeah. And I have to imagine that that's part of the reason why it ended up taking off the way that it did in the original, while still, you know, relatively popular. It wasn't like this huge smash that everybody knows today. Because as far as I'm concerned, Joan Jett has the far superior version here.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Similar to Soft Cell. I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with the Gloria Jones version of Tainted Love. It's wonderful. I think you'll even hear it on like on the radio in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. There's a radio. Yeah, it's one of those. I think there's a few of these original cover songs on that soundtrack, but yeah, there's just like they changed the song enough and made it their own enough that I prefer the cover. So, you know, it's not always just the fact that it's original. That doesn't always just automatically make it better. The same way that the fact that it's a cover doesn't automatically make it better. It's just, it's the attitude that comes across, I think, with Joan Jett's, not just her voice, but literally the attitude that's coming across. It's fantastic.
Man.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I could talk about Joan Jett all day, so we need to move forward.
Well, so we're going on to another badass lady of that era, which is Cyndi Lauper. This was one I did not realize.
I'm learning about this right now as we're talking about it. Seriously.
Yeah. So Girls Just Want to Have Fun, her debut song, her hit song off of her first debut album, is a song that had been written and recorded and released 4 years prior by a dude,
which is weird to think about.
Yeah. Guy Robert Hazard recorded and put it out. It's from the male point of view, which is, again, it seems like an odd kind of song to
Very
write
weird.
as a dude. But I think part of that is because we're used to it being this sort of feminist anthem, like this kind of, jaunty celebration of female solidarity. And then to look back and be like, wait, this sad boy wrote it? Like, what is that all about?
Yeah, I don't know.
When you go back and listen to it, though, it's definitely it's different. She kills it. It almost seems like it should have been written for her or for somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not familiar with Robert Hazard, so I'm really sorry.
I'm not at all.
I if he's listening, I apologize. But it definitely seems like, a song that got beamed into his head, and I'm glad, I can't find any backstory on how it got from him to her, because his song wasn't a hit, so it's not something that she would have heard on the radio. I did some Googling. I didn't really see a whole lot, so you just don't know. There's always stories about a producer comes in and he knows a guy and he plays a thing and he heard a thing or whatever. And that happens even more and more now with YouTube and Instagram and stuff, but there's always stories about Quincy Jones walking in and telling somebody that you got to listen to this or you got to hear that. And it influences a whole scattershot of things. So who knows how Cyndi Lauper and her team heard about Girls Just Want to Have Fun, but we're so glad she did and decided to transform it into such a important, formative pop song from that era. We also I marked down Red Red Wine because ubiquitous with UB40. If you think of UB40, that's probably the song
actually, I can't think of any others.
Yeah, actually was written by Jewish Elvis, aka Neil Diamond. He's he's the greatest. The man who wrote basically all of the best Monkees songs as well. The Monkees just played a bunch of Neil Diamond songs. Neil Diamond's the man, and so he wrote this kind of reggae infused jam back in '67, and then UB40, a bunch of weird British dudes who play reggae, decided that they'd take that and make it their own. This one shocked me. Quiet Riot, Come On Feel the Noise.
Oh, really?
Especially,
okay.
I didn't know this. Yeah.
So I knew it was a cover song.
Really?
But it was one of those things where I knew it was a cover, but I knew nothing about the original, who originally wrote it. I figured it was just kind of, one of these less heavy versions of the same thing. But my friend, let me tell you, this, coming off of recently talking about Big Star and kind of the whole glam rock scene, the power pop scene, I will never forget this weekend because this is the weekend that I learned about Slade. And Slade is the glam rock band that originally wrote and recorded Come On Feel the Noise with
the same spelling?
Yes.
It's
with the original highly questionable spelling.
Yeah.
In 10 years earlier, 1973.
That's so crazy that this song is.
I'm going to come right out and say that the Slade version is so much better.
Really?
It's so good. If you like T-Rex or MC5 or any of those, it's so good. It's an excellent, excellent song. And Quiet Riot just kind of comes in and it almost sounds too produced and all they did was like they sprayed hairspray on it and tried to make it sound like a hair metal song. And
Wow.
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a fan of Quiet Riot, but I like the music that they put out. I think it's fun. It kind of was one of the kind of formative hair metal artists early on. So I got to give them credit for that. But that original song by Slade is 10 years before the Quiet Riot version. And it's
Man.
almost identical sonically, other than like the 80s, shiny production on it and the hair metalization of it. But it's so good. And it was a hit in the UK, but it only hit like 98 in the top 100 in the US. And then Quiet Riot came along and covered it 10 years later, and it went to like number 5. So it was like they made it kind of more of a hit, to the point that Quiet Riot got greedy and was like, oh, well, this is our cash cow. Well, let's just do another Slade song the very next year. And it kind of bombed. Yes. They did another Slade cover the very next year in 84 called Mama We're All Crazy Now. WEER all crazy.
I'm
CRAZEE.
seeing Slade, like all of these Slade things, the spelling on their song titles
all
is
jacked up,
all in line. now the Come
It
On
all
Feel
comes
the Noise
together,
is making
yeah.
so much more sense. Good boy T Jane with the GUD, like goodbye T Jane. This is
you almost can't
am I
read
going
it.
down a Slade hole?
Slade. I am Slade's newest fan.
I need to learn about Slade now.
They're so good. It's just a great, like, how did I never hear about this? I'm a huge fan of like 70s glam. Like, how did I not know about this?
Oh my God, dude. I'm looking at the album cover for the 5th album called Slade in Flame, and it looks incredible.
It's so good. Like when I looked it up on YouTube, it's like it's a TV performance, but you can tell like, it's obviously canned. They're miming it, but they like play into the fact that they're miming it. Like they did Nirvana 20 years before Nirvana, where it's a straight up rock song and the dude comes out with an acoustic guitar. Like he knows, like he's playing into the fact that, okay, this is dumb.
Yeah, we all know that this is fake, so let me just really ham it up.
And one of the other guitar players is dancing like a sailor. Like they're just being so goofy, but they're hamming it up with knowing that the audience knows that this is not a live recording. And so they did the Nirvana thing 20 years before Nirvana. They just like, made a mockery of the whole television experience in front of the camera. It's fantastic. So I am Slade's newest fan. I'm happy to say.
I'm going to walk away from this learning lots about Slade now. This is so cool.
It's so much fun.
The next song is a song that I adore.
Yeah.
It's another one where I knew it was a cover, but someone had told me over the years, but I'd never listened to the original version until this weekend in going over this stuff. It's Got My Mind Set on You, which was off of Cloud 9. Great album by George Harrison.
Yep. His last number one hit.
Yeah. It's his last solo album, I think, too. Maybe like before he passed. I'm not sure. But yeah, it was a cover of this little known R&B singer named James Ray. I think it was out in the early 60s.
All the way back to 62.
62.
Long way back. The Beatles still covering early 60s songs.
Yeah, well, and I think that that's where things, the sort of cross-pollination on this one came from. James Ray had another song called If You Gotta Make a Fool of Somebody. And the Beatles performed that live a few times. Yeah.
Didn't know that either.
Yeah, and so the story goes that George... he was doing a little record shopping in the States at one point while the Beatles were stateside, and he grabbed this album back on its initial release back in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
And then, 2 decades later decides to take a stab at this one in celebration of an artist, like a little known artist that he was a fan of.
Did you listen to it this weekend?
I did. It sounds exactly like what you would think a 62
version of that
like
song. Yeah.
Kind of big bandy pop, but it's an R&B song. But it's glossy,
Yeah.
I was expecting it to be a little bluesier almost. And it wasn't as much. It was a little pop soul. But it's a great version. I mean, I'm still partial to George's just because of the nostalgia of it. But it does make me want to kind of go dig through the handful of records that James Ray cut to
definitely
learn about what he put out there, because I don't think that there's a whole lot. He died pretty young, apparently. He died a year after this album came out.
This is the first time I'm learning about him this weekend, and I really enjoy the original a lot more than I thought I would. Also, the iconic music video for George Harrison's version is hard to ignore.
I love that
excellent.
video. It creeped me out as a kid, but I adore that video.
All the best music videos creeped you out when you were a kid. That's how it worked.
Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer,
Peter
baby.
Gabriel,
Those dancing
Thriller,
chickens.
all that stuff.
Thriller, yeah.
But yeah, I was surprised at how much I did enjoy the original by James Ray.
Yeah.
Speaking of surprising covers from 1987, I was shocked as a Heart fan, because I wasn't as big of a Heart fan as I thought, to learn that Alone, the quintessential Heart power ballad, one of the greatest power ballads of all time, is in fact
big statement.
A cover song. No, it's I will die on that hill.
You put your flag. Let's do it.
I'll die on that hill.
Okay.
I was shocked to learn that this was a cover song by a songwriting duo, Billy Steinberg and Tom Kelly, under their weird project name called I-10, lowercase I hyphen capital T 10.
So weird.
Released only like 4 years before the Heart. It was on their 1987 album. There's this weird song recorded and released in 1983 under the name I-10, and it's not that great. Like, it's like what's weird about it is it's like it's not all that different from Heart's interpretation of it, but it just comes across as so forgettable. Like the melodies are all there. The other than like maybe the high harmony during the chorus, like it's all there, but like Heart just gives it the power and the, like, I'm trying to avoid saying the word heart. It just gives it like the power, and it's just not a memorable original song. They took it and they made it a Heart song, and the power of the Wilson sisters, I guess, turned it into something incredibly memorable. And so I think that's pretty special. So there's a weird thing on this one, and here's another gray zone that we get into. So I'm not familiar with, what was it? I-10? I don't I-10.
Like, that's such a weird, I've never heard of I-10
Me either.
before.
It's so weird.
But
and why would you stylize it that way?
There's a recorded version of this song by I-10, you said? That
it was like their
to?
recording. It was like a recording project by this songwriting duo.
Well, yeah. So Steinberg and Kelly, they wrote crazy stuff, dude. They wrote
a lot,
like a Virgin, Eternal Flame by the Bangles, So Emotional, Whitney Houston, I'll Stand By You, The Pretenders. Like, they were a massive songwriting duo for a while. I just didn't think that they ever recorded their own stuff.
Yeah, they tried to put out this album under this weird name. Instead of calling it like Steinberg and Kelly or something like that.
Yeah.
They called it
That's
I-10
so
with a
weird.
lowercase I, and it's very strange. Granted, it was
That's so
1983. They were probably all high as a kite and had no clue what they were doing, so who knows?
Yeah, man.
It's weird.
This one kind of blew my mind. I don't know if I ever knew that the Black Crowes Hard to Handle, and I don't know if Alfred, our friend Alfred Schultz, is listening right now. I'm really sorry.
I was going to bring up Alfred.
This is his favorite band, but I don't know too many Black Crowes songs. I know this one, and it's an Otis Redding cover, and it, like, once you hear that it's an Otis Redding song, it makes a lot of sense. And look, the Black Crowes are fantastic, and they're a very great bluesy rock band. And I think that they do something really cool with this. But I went back and I listened to the Otis Redding original, and maybe it's just where I'm at right now, and maybe I'm just not a Black Crowes guy, but like that Otis Redding version's pretty good.
It's very good.
Yeah,
it's very good.
But
not to
but
take
the Black
away.
Crowes thing. It's a jam. It's
They're
a
both
good time.
excellent.
Yeah.
It's just, the difference between 1968 and 1990, I guess. I mean, there's a big gap there. Not the biggest gap we're going to have on this episode, but a pretty sizable gap. So I just have to imagine, them being fans of Otis and the other just soulful, because Black Crowes are pretty soulful for a rock outfit, and to be able to kind of southern rock up a soul song, for lack of a better term here, had to have been a ton of fun, and it works really, really well. I didn't know it was a cover song until much later in life. I remember hearing it on the radio quite a bit in the 90s, and I can't remember when it was. It must have been somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to 15 years ago. I heard the original, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, like you said.
Yeah.
But it is, despite how just legendary and iconic Otis Redding is, it's like, wow, it's hard to pick which one of these I would rather want to listen to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it depends on where you're at. Like if I'm driving in the car, I think I'll go to the Black Crowes version. But if I'm just like home, throwing a record on, doing some chores, hanging out, I'm going to go Otis Redding. I mean, it's Otis Redding.
Definitely. I can feel
so
that.
This
100%.
next one, we talked about this probably a year ago, was it? We did
it came up.
Love songs. Yeah. So still a shocker to many. I Will Always Love You is often associated with Whitney Houston. It's one of her most known
good reason
songs. Although, like, I Want to Dance with Somebody, I mean, the lady had a ton of hits.
Oh yeah.
But was originally a Dolly Parton song. The Dolly version was penned still out of love, but it was really a breakup song for her partner, Porter Wagoner.
Right.
They had
it
been
wasn't
a duo.
Romantic breakup.
Yeah. She was ready to go off and do her own thing. She was breaking up the duo, basically. The story for this one goes that they needed a song for like a big kind of moment for the bodyguard, and they had another song in mind, and it already was being used for another film at the time. And so Kevin Costner, who was her co-star in The Bodyguard, suggested this by playing her a cover that Linda Ronstadt had done.
No way.
Yeah. So Linda Ronstadt kind of bridges the gap. And Kevin Costner's a country guy. He's put out country rock records. Like he's a very musically like in tune and savvy guy to begin with. So it's not altogether surprising that he would have his ear on something and kind of slip something in there.
Right.
But yeah, so he played her the Linda Ronstadt version, the cover of Dolly Parton, and then Whitney worked with David Foster and rearranged it as an applicable 90s R&B ballad.
Yeah, well, she turns it to what is probably, I know I said this about, okay, so if we can separate it by decade, this is the power ballad of the 90s, right?
Yeah.
We can do that. So Whitney Houston comes out, and this is the power ballad of the 90s. Mm-hmm. And if you listen to the Dolly Parton original, it's a lot more soft spoken. She's not belting it out the way that Whitney does. And every cover that you hear on, every singing competition show ever, they're doing the Whitney Houston version.
They're doing the Whitney, yeah.
So she, that's kind of her song now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Dolly would say the same thing. I don't think that's as much of a stretch to say. But yeah, still kind of surprising when you do go back and hear the original that, she's not at the height of her volume or register the way that Whitney is getting close to when she's belting out that chorus. It's just kind of a soft country tune.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah, you can sense the sentiment a little bit. And again, I think part of that is also David Foster's production, like of his time and what he's done. He's always kind of sculpted those soundscapes in his pop music. So like it makes sense that teaming up with Whitney Houston, you get that as a result, as opposed to Dolly Parton basically going home and penning this as a therapeutic way of breaking up with her business partner. Like,
there you go.
There's two different trajectories that lead to the same song.
Yeah. But that's what's great about music is you can have a song that it can mean something totally different to different people, and that's a beautiful thing. But so speaking of songs that are way overdone when it comes to being covered on YouTube or on singing competition television shows, we inevitably have to at least touch on Jeff Buckley's version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah.
It's a weird one. Yeah. Because
I'm almost bored of talking about it, and we haven't even talked about it yet.
No, yeah, it's not even that. It's more so like, this is a cover, like, like, I don't know. There's a few of these that I had in mind of like, they're interesting to talk about. Like I thought, Sinead O'Connor's Nothing Compares to You or American Woman by Lenny Kravitz. But I also feel like, those are just like, we know they did a cover song, you know, and they did a cool thing about it, like Jeff Buckley's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cut down or taken from us far too quickly.
Yeah. Again, as I have brought this to our listeners' attention many times, ladies and gentlemen, drugs and swimming in the ocean do not mix.
Very bad.
Just don't do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't end well especially if you're a musician, apparently.
Yeah.
It's bad times.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make light of it.
Yeah.
But seriously.
But like Leonard Cohen, penned this iconic classic, and I feel like whether it's a direct cover or bits and pieces that have been interwoven through countless other songs, like this is a song, again, it's not to take anything away from it. It's gorgeous. It's a very important song. Mm-hmm. It's just this
different.
is a song. This is a song that we all know is out there, and it's echoes through music even today.
Leonard Cohen's version doesn't break your heart.
No, that's true. Yeah.
We can leave it at that. But I can see myself at times preferring to listen to the Leonard Cohen version. Just kind of depends on the headspace.
Yeah, I think I said in joke in a group chat or a Discord chat at one point or whatever, like I'm kind of earmarking my like mid 50s for my Leonard Cohen phase. Like I'm just like
planning it out.
I feel like I've got like Tom Waits before that or something. Like I've got a couple things that I need to get through before I get to my Leonard Cohen phase.
I mean, you haven't gotten to Elvis Costello yet, so
no,
you've got a ways to go.
Yeah. It's true.
to get
That's
to
a good
Leonard
point.
Cohen.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Have you had your Bob Dylan moment yet? Has that happened?
Sometimes. Yeah, I feel like my appreciation for Dylan ebbs and flows. My wife would bring Dylan, like would put Dylan's music on early on when we were dating. And I have a lot of appreciation for it. And there's songs that I like, but I
Okay,
don't
so you haven't had the Bob Dylan obsession thing where
No.
okay.
Have you?
No.
Oh, okay. No.
I might also be kind of pushing that off to late 40s, early 50s as well.
Yeah.
Hasn't
Yeah, I feel like
happened
I'll get to it. I feel like I'll get to it. He's still alive. It's fine.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. This one was
Bjork.
very surprising. Let's
it.
talk about Bjork. Let's talk about
Yeah, please do. 'Cause
everyone's
I don't know this song.
favorite Icelander. Is that what they call themselves?
I mean, there's a lot of great people from Iceland, but she's top,
She's
top
up
tier.
there.
I like Sigur Rós a lot. They're pretty great.
Oh yeah, for sure. But this one, if I had to pick one that shocked me the most to discover was a cover song these past couple days, it's this one. Bjork's 1995 album Post was very formative for me. I loved it. Army of Me was a massive hit. This song was a big hit too. It's Oh So Quiet. There was a music video it was very kind of a, I don't know what it was just like everyone dancing in the streets, dance routines, and very planned and orchestrated, almost like a Hollywood, type of production. And, it was very different. It's got a big band swing style to it. And I never thought anything of it because she was just so eclectic and different in the things that she would do and the types of music that I just thought it was a one-off, like, hey, I wrote this song. Nope. Turns out it is a 1951 song, originally released by singer, actress, performer Betty Hutton. And oh my God, is it so faithful to the original?
Really?
Right
That's
down
not
to
what
the
I
like
expected you to say.
like when she's shushing as part of the lyrics. And
Wow.
it's so wild to hear because it's like, I've never heard of Betty Hutton, and it's very much what you would expect from like a vampy, kind of almost Marilyn Monroe-esque sort of character. And it makes a lot more sense to hear someone sing Zing Boom in a 1951 tune than in the mid 90s. But it's just so cool to hear, oh, wow. She just basically did the entire big band thing it sounds so similar, but it's so cool. Strongly recommend listening to the original. It's just so much fun, especially if you have listened to and are fans of the Bjork version. It's really interesting. It blew my mind earlier today. Honestly, it was just very, very cool.
I'd love to know why this happened,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like, when you think of, Delta Cream, right? The Black Keys cover album was released because it was the core of what that band has loved as they're making their music over their time. And so it was very true to the original source material. And when you hear what you just said, that she's very true and not Bjorking it up on this song, it makes me think that there's some weird appreciation that she has for Betty Hutton, like what is that? I know she's an actress and musician. Like maybe there's some crazy background story where like Bjork grew up watching movies that she was in or something. It seems too dialed in for there to not be a context. This doesn't feel like something that somebody just brought into the studio. To be fair, Bjork also doesn't feel like an artist that somebody just brings something to. I feel like they get beamed from outer space into her brain. So
right.
So I don't know what like,
I tried
why
to
this
look
happened.
that up, and I could
Yeah.
not find anything as far as like the moment that she found it or decided on it or someone
Yeah.
suggested it to her. Who knows?
Maybe we'll never
But
know. Yeah.
I couldn't find anything on it. But plot twist.
Do
So
it.
the Betty Hutton version was released in 1951, but that is a cover of a German song.
No.
Yes. Performed by Horst Winter in 1948 with music written by
forget Slade.
Austrian
I'm-
composer Hans Lang and German lyrics by Erich Mieder. The English lyrics were written by Bert Reisfeld. So take that for what you will.
Horst Winter?
I guess.
That's what you said?
Yeah. If you
Horst
look up
Winter?
Horst, Horst,
I just want you to
Winter.
say it again.
Oh, I don't know how
Oh,
to.
yeah. Horst Winter. There it is. I see it. Wow. Okay. So is it Slade or is it Horst Winter that I'm going to go all ham on the next week? Or I
It's
guess I
gonna
could
be
do both.
Slade.
I could find time for both. Dude.
It's going
I
to be Slade.
don't-
You're going to
Horst
Slade is going to
Winter.
blow your mind, dude. I'm serious.
I don't know. I'm in a jazzy space right now. I could go for a Polish jazz composer and band director.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right. I'll go Slade.
There was a French version too in 1949
Yeah.
called Tout
something
est
tells
tranquille.
me- Yeah.
I'm
something
so
tells
bad
me
with like
that
German and French. Like I do not like my Italian tongue won't do it. Like I can speak Spanish with a Spanish accent. Well, I can
Yeah.
do a little bit of the Portuguese thing, but like I cannot pronounce this German and French stuff. My mouth just will not make these sounds.
Yeah. Well, then
Forgive
I mean,
me, anyone. I'm butchering some German and French words and names here, so I apologize.
Well, then, I mean, we're going to stay in the sort of Nordic space for the next one.
Yep.
And I didn't even put in some of the stuff here that I could get you to say. So it's weird. So Natalie Imbruglia, actress, like soap opera actress in Australia, has this big breakout solo release. I remember my sister buying the cassette. Like this is one of like the first like cassettes that we bought like with our own money. Because Torn was such a massive hit.
It was huge.
It was all over the radio. And you come to find, and again, all these Genesis kind of in different ways. This is a situation where it was first kind of written and recorded a few years before that by a handful of songwriters together. They had called it Brant, which is Danish for burnt. So not burnt, not torn, but burnt. And then like one of the songwriters had a rock band based in Denmark, I think it is, called Edna Swap. And so they put this out. So Edna Swap puts this song out, doesn't really do much. Then an artist called Lise Sorensen puts it out in Danish. Then another singer called Trine Ren puts it out. Like this is all in the gap of like 95 to 96.
Yeah, this wasn't
right?
like this long drawn out
No.
thing.
No.
It was all within a few years.
But like the gumption of this one songwriter, this guy Phil Thornelly, who is one of the original composers of the song, he goes and he starts working with this actress, Natalie Imbruglia, and brings this song that has already been released 3 other times to her, and it's just like, no, this is the one.
This
Like,
is the
no,
one.
but
Yeah.
you should do
Fourth or
this
fifth
one.
time's the charm.
Yeah, like you're going to be the one who takes this where it needs to be. And the crazy thing is, he's right. Like
Yeah. It's an international
she puts it out
smash.
there, and it gets nominated for a Grammy, and it probably would have won, except Celine Dion put out "My Heart Will Go On," and so the
Yeah,
whole
you
music
can't.
industry fell apart. Like, what are
Yeah.
you gonna do?
Yeah. So did the film industry on the back of that movie. Holy moly.
right. So like, it was never really gonna win a Grammy, but like maybe it could have.
Should have waited one more year.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that like in the span of 2 years at best, this thing was released. Granted, it was being released in like Norway and Denmark and Sweden and whatever. Like, it never really had the international impact. And I think that this guy saw his opportunity and was just like, this album's going to take off, and I've got your jam right here, you know? And it clicked. So can't be mad at that. It's a great version. I threw in this one just because I think it's super fun.
Any opportunity to talk about presidents of the United States of America.
Come on, right? Especially because, like, you're not going to talk about a whole lot of covers with those guys. Like, Chris Ballou just writes some funky stuff, you know? Yeah. Love those guys. But they were approached to cover a song for the Drew Carey Show.
Right.
So most people know Cleveland Rocks because it was the theme song for the Drew Carey Show, which at the time, super popular sitcom, but was actually a cover of an Ian Hunter song. Ian Hunter of the band Mott the Hoople. He had penned this back in the late 70s, but it hadn't gotten a proper release because the label thought, I mean, he's like a British musician, and they're like, you're writing a song about what? Cleveland? Like, no. And so, like, it seems like he was kind of coerced into changing it to England Rocks instead of Cleveland Rocks.
It doesn't have quite the same ring to it.
No. And so it gets put out by England Rocks, but then there's a live version and he twists it to Cleveland Rocks. And it kind of, if you look at the release history, it goes back and forth. You'll find iterations
That's so
of both.
Weird.
It's very strange. But the Presidents of the United States of America version is very cool. They put out, I think it's like mainly a live album called Pure Frosting. I still have that around.
I think it was a lot of B-sides, and
it was.
There was a lot of
mix of B-sides and lives.
I had
You know what? But so I remember, tangent real quick. I remember going to the record store and picking up like one of those catch-all, we'll call it, and like the B-side live collection albums. And I'd be like disappointed initially because I'd think, like, I didn't have the communication of the internet at the time to know what this was. So I'd see it and I'm like, this is a new album. And then it's just like a jumble of stuff. But looking back on it, I'm like, but looking back on it, I'm like, that's pretty cool. Like, that's how you put out a bunch of random like bits and pieces. Like, it's pretty neat to have that, because now you just get that on, you know, Spotify or whatever.
Right.
Stuff back
gets
then,
thrown
like, that was the
into
only
like
way you
a
were going to
special
get it.
release.
Yeah, like when you released something in Japan, like you had to put a bunch of extra stuff on it because stuff was so expensive in Japan. So artists would throw like B-sides and stuff on Japanese releases, and then we'd never get them in the States until they put them all on one collection like that. So,
or you pay $40 for the Japanese import for 5 songs.
I didn't do much of that.
I did it once or twice.
So another one we touched on fairly recently was written, or was performed, I should say, recorded for the Can't Hardly Wait soundtrack. Can't Get Enough of You Baby, Smash Mouth, was originally a Four Seasons song. So another appearance by Frankie Valli and his boys here. Will not be the last one.
Nope.
Yeah, there's going to be one more of those at least. This one I blew my wife's mind with. So the Baha Men, Who Let the Dogs Out, actually was written by this Trinidadian songwriter named Anselm Douglas. Wrote it, recorded it, put it out. Did okay in Europe. Didn't get any release outside of, I think, like in Jamaica, and then in Europe. But the manager, while he was in Europe, heard this song. It was just called Doggy. It wasn't called Who Let the Dogs Out. It was just called Doggy. And he heard it, and he had this group that he was managing at the time, and he's like, this is the song. And the band was not into it, dude. The band heard this and was like, you kidding me? Like, no way.
But he's like, yo, this song is going to be played at every high school dance for the next 20 years.
Dude, I know this guy. Like, I know when I saw I was reading through this, like, I know this guy.
No
and
way.
That's 100% what happened. Like, I'm 100%. He is so sharp. I'm like, that's exactly what happened. Is he's like, this is a hit. So the original had more, I mean, like, the lyrics aren't really changed much. The original, I think, was just because it wasn't as like hokey, read like a feminist anthem kind of thing about like, look at these dogs running around here.
Right.
You can still hear that if you listen to the lyrics, but no one's listening to the lyrics. But
No,
Baja Man,
it's the
they're just
Macarena.
barking.
You're just
Yeah.
exactly. You're not listening to the lyrics.
Exactly.
You're just doing the
Yeah.
dance.
Yeah.
So
So it's a weird one. It's a weird one, but super fun.
yeah.
So Emotion, Destiny's Child, off of Survivor, I believe is the album.
I don't know this one.
Yeah, so it's a gorgeous, gorgeous song. And I didn't know that this was a cover. It's a weird genesis. So the Gibb brothers of the Bee Gees penned this back in the 70s. They had somebody perform it. This lady Samantha Sang releases it. It gets some traction. It's not like a massive hit or anything like that, but it doesn't just fall completely under the radar. The Bee Gees would perform this themselves live. It was supposed to be on a collection in the 90s, and it never made it there, but they do include it on their greatest hits because they'd had success performing it live, and they'd been known for it a bit. But Destiny's Child, it's worth checking out. When you hear the original version of it, the Destiny's Child version, I think it holds up. I think it's really good, but there is something really special about hearing Barry Gibb sings background on the original version with Samantha Sang, who's definitely like in the mix on this. And if you like the sort of ballady Bee Gees stuff, it's really good. But I love Destiny's Child, and I love a Destiny's Child ballad, like
I'll have to
Survivor
listen to
and
it. I don't know it.
Bootylicious, like all of those things are super fun.
You gotta have a good ballad on there.
Yeah. So this one, next one, you and I talked a little bit about.
I think we should talk about
how this falls. So Rage Against the Machine, puts out their fourth album. I remember it. If I'm recalling my own personal memory, I remember it being framed like their fourth album. To be fair, I think Guns N' Roses also did this with the Spaghetti Incident, and that's a bunch of covers, and there's also a bunch of covers on like some of their other albums too. So there's shenanigans that get played across here. Like we just said, the first two Joan Jett albums have maybe an album's worth of songs written by her combined, So covers be covers be covers. But Renegades of Funk was the main single, though Ghost of Tom Joad is the one I think that they perform mostly now. Like when I saw them live, that's what they did off of this album. I don't think they did Renegades of Funk.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's any legality issues there, but the music video off of this album was Ghost of Tom Joad. So I don't know if that's I don't know. I'm not well enough acquainted with the whole like legal mess surrounding that type of thing, but it was I don't remember either how it was like marketed, although it was only a year after Bad Love Los Angeles, so I think it was more just like a collection of things they had recorded and did a few more and put it together. It's really good. It's an excellent Rage album. Holy moly. Like you've got the MC5, the Stooges, Minor Threat. Yeah. Like it's not just a bunch of stuff that you would think would work well for, the biggest rap rock band ever. Yeah. I think that this is one of those it's an album of covers that actually does what other covers albums sets out to do, with the exception of maybe people like Cat Power. This is just pure Rage Against the Machine doing what they do. And like most of these tracks are in my mind improvements on the original. Like they're so good.
Yeah.
I mean, Pistol
I
Grip
can hear
Pump,
that.
like come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like so good.
I think you're right. Like in that sense, it is a Rage album. Like regardless of who wrote it, like they interpret it their own way. Yeah, no, it's a fantastic
Rick Rubin
album
at the board, so it's like you can't get much better than that. I mean, it's so good.
It's just like if you're talking about the discography of a band, I feel like I say that Rage has 3 albums. Like 3 albums, and then it's a collection of great stuff, but there's still just 3 Rage albums, which also seems crazy. Then again, saying that there's 4 also seems crazy. Like for a band that's that massive, like kind of wish it was a little bit more. But what are you gonna do?
Understand?
Yeah,
definitely worth checking out if you haven't, though.
Yeah. So when I discovered that this next song was a cover, I immediately put it in the same bucket as the Fugees' Killing Me Softly, which you could consider a cover, but it's really not.
Yeah, it's more really of a reimagining.
It's like a derivative work where it's the same hook, but there's so much else going on in between there that is the Fugees, that it's an interpretation and not a cover. But when I listened to the original Lady Marmalade, I was like, no, this is a cover. Like, obviously
really is.
There's no Lil' Kim.
Right.
There will never be another Lil' Kim. But like, no, this is a cover. Like it's lyric to lyric in most spots. It is, it's the same song, originally done by LaBelle back in 74. And they basically resurfaced this song for Moulin Rouge and put an all-star cast together. Missy Elliott, Pink, Lil' Kim, Maya, and Christina Aguilera.
Which is pretty nuts when you think about it.
So incredible.
Like, you don't see that these days. You're not going to see that probably, not like that. You're not going to see this type of, I mean, what? Christina Aguilera, Pink, Missy Elliott, Maya, and Lil' Kim. That's like if you put out a movie and you had a song that was a cover song that's 25 years old, and you had like, I don't even know who to compare it to, and you had Cardi B and
Megan Thee Stallion.
Megan Thee Stallion and Ariana Grande and Camila Cabello and one other. I'm so old. I don't know. I can't think of it.
No, but that's
you know what I'm talking about? Like there's
never,
no way you would see that happen these days. It just would not happen. It's nuts.
Yeah, the weird thing is, I think so. Missy Elliott was always listed in that, but I think she was the producer of the song. Like I remember her being in the music video, but she doesn't rap on the song at all. I think she produced it though. Well, no, it's like
her just being there is cool.
Enough. Well, but I think like for her, because she had always, it was always Missy Elliott, and then like Timbaland was producing her, right? And so there was this kind of shift at that point, and it's cool that it's a LaBelle song too, that is being done, where it's just like a woman produced an all-star cast of women for this very empowered song. Like it's very cool that's how that played out, and that she kind of pieced it all together. So a random one that I only discovered semi recently. So Norah Jones wins the Grammy in 2002-03 for Don't Know Why. I think we just talked about her on a recent
we talked about it recently
too, because I think that I picked her album for our end of the year thing at some point. But the breakaway song, the song that like showed up on MTV and everyone's like, who's this sad lady walking on the beach and why am I in love? You know, like
it's a great song.
Just like, and it was penned 3 years prior and released by this guy, Jesse Harris, who's still performing music now. He put out a great album last year before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've worked with the guy a bunch. Like he's really cool.
Very cool.
He was brought in, so it wasn't just like she took the song. Like there was a little bit of a collaborative thing on
cool.
this. But it was wholly his song that she just completely changed. And his version's good. Like it sounds very raw singer-songwritery.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't. Nora Jones is Nora Jones to me. So like,
right.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't know until just now that was a cover either.
Yeah. It's like obscure singer songwriter guy, or at the time she was obscure, but then the Grammy winning industry darling Nora Jones. Yeah.
Awesome.
But you just never know. Like, song's going to resonate where it's going to resonate.
Exactly.
It's My Life. So
this was a
no
big
doubt.
One.
Yeah. Again, we're getting into a territory here where I know, or I think some people know that it's a cover. Like, I'm not sure, but who cares?
Right.
Yeah. So they put out their greatest hits in 2003. If you throw your mind back to that time, Gwen Stefani is going solo at that time. She's also launching her Love Angel Music Baby Lamb clothing line. She has become fully realized. You remember the Don't Speak music video where it's all about like everybody's focusing on her and cutting the rest of the band out of the picture? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, she goes and does that, so whatever. Yeah, spoiler alert, that happens like 5 years later.
Life. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so she's off doing her solo stuff, and so they're putting out this greatest hits, and they're like, well, we got to put something cool on there, and we don't have any like B-sides like we're talking about. Like, we need something compelling. And so they toss around a bunch of 80s songs because they had been in that reggae ska space, and they wanted to kind of show a different angle to the band. Mm-hmm. And so I think there was like a Depeche Mode song that they tossed around. There's a couple songs that they're on record saying like, we tried these out in the studio, and It's My Life by Talk Talk, which was a hit. You know, it was, if you're doing deep cuts on 80s top charting songs,
pretty
you'll
well
find
known
it there.
In that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it did well there. But you're not hearing it on regular radio now. And this was a hit. No. Like this, they did a music video. Like it did really well for them.
It was kind of the perfect move to push the greatest hits album. Yeah. They really made it their own. They gave it the No Doubt sound. I still to this day, being I don't know what you call it. I was a huge fan back then. Obviously, Tragic Kingdom was huge for me, and subsequent album
I liked
was
Return
pretty
of Saturn. Yeah,
I did as well. And so I can't call myself like a current No Doubt fan, but I just have fond memories of like listening to them driving around in my car in the late 90s and stuff like that. But to this day, I really do think that the original is better. They did a really good job with it. It's a great cover. It pushed them forward in terms of like just seeing what they're able to do, like to grow as musicians. But I got to go with the original on this one. Yeah. It's really, really a standout, and it's kind of a shame. Like I think they're kind of a one-hit wonder.
Talk.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't really know of any other even semi hits that they had. No. But I hope, if whoever is in the band is still around is making money off of the No Doubt version. Hope they're getting some nice royalty checks. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. This one's a little bit more in the pocket, in the pop punk pocket. So just indulge me for a second.
Go for it.
Because I think it's really weird. So like Bowling for Soup, they had 2 hits. Girl All the Bad Guys Want, and then 1985. 1985 being the one that like stuck and smashed and continues to get radio play today. Mm-hmm. There's a weird thing that happened with this one. So in that like pop punk gold rush of the early 2000s, where it was just like every band had a number at the end of its name, and it happened, you know. There was a band called SR71 that had a hit that I loved. It was called Right Now. I could sing it for you right now. I'm not going to. But it was the kind of stuff we were playing, like American Hi-Fi, like in my buddy's garage, and we would play their songs. So this song 1985 comes out in 2004. Years later, I hear this interview with the lead singer of Bowling for Soup, and he's telling the story about how SR71 put out their third album, but they put it out in Japan only because pop punk, by the time we got to 2003, 2004, had kind of like shattered, and like there were pockets of interest, and so they could only get a label to physically release in Japan. They couldn't get physical product. There wasn't like streaming services that were in full effect. You had iTunes, but that was about it. So their distro deal was only in Japan. And so SR71 puts out their third and final album, Japan only, in 2003. Bowling for Soup is messing around with them. They're touring around outside of the country, and they hear this song, and they're like, well, can we play this song and like put it on our album?
We'll release it.
Yeah, and SR71's like, I guess, sure. Like, you know, they get paid because it's their song. So they're like, sure, go ahead. And they give them their biggest hit as a band ever. It's so crazy to me.
Wild.
And like, look, 1985 is a fine song and whatever. I'm not championing this as some groundbreaking pop song, but it's like crazy to me to think that like this band is touring, they can't get anything done. They're at the end of their business options, and this other band comes along and they're like, yeah, sure, I guess you could go ahead, just pay us some money when it takes off, who knows. And then the thing blows up and they're like, oh man, we could have, what?
Yeah.
Why is it not us? Why is it him, not me?
Dang.
So crazy.
Missed opportunity.
That same year, we had a couple interesting covers. So 2004 is when we get the Bowling for Soup 1985 rollout. Sheryl Crow does First Cut is the Deepest, which I think most people don't know that that's a Cat Stevens song, but maybe they do. I'm not sure. Yep. I think most people associate it with her. And again, now we're getting to this point where there's a big gap here. We have decades worth of recorded music, and a lot of stuff starts coming around. I would not be surprised if people who were born in the 90s, you know, and were coming of age in the 2000s heard 311 do Love Song and thought that was their song because they like Cali vibed it, you know, like it really feels like it's their song, but it's actually The Cure.
Yeah.
Same thing for Uncle Kracker, which I know that when you looked at this list, you were like, oh, we're talking about Uncle Kracker today. Great. Sweet. But like when you think of Drift Away, you don't think of Dobie Gray in the 70s. You think of Uncle Kracker.
It's true.
And I also
can't argue with that.
I also think that like because a lot of these covers are done in association with movies, there's that too. So Rascal Flatts covers Life is a Highway. The original version is a hit. I think that dude's Canadian, and I think like he had some massive success off. Like he had one hit wonder, but like it was a really big song.
It was hit. Yeah, I remember being a kid and hearing it. Like I was with my dad in a hardware store, and it came on over the speakers. I was like, oh, this is a great song, and I was like 7.
Right.
I remember
so then,
that.
If you think of it, you're like. So 16 years after that, Cars, the Pixar movie, comes out, and Rascal Flatts covers your song. Now, again, you're getting money off of that because it's your song. So, like, you're probably not bummed about it. And also, it's been 16 years, like, so cool, like another kick it up a notch kind of thing. Maybe that's your retirement. But, like, it is weird that again, you're thinking that there's probably kids who only know the Rascal Flatts version and didn't hear what you heard when you were 7.
Right.
You know, they like didn't even know that was a thing.
I was wrong. It was 91, so I was 9.
Okay, there you go. I think American Woman is a similar thing. Like I remember, but I think the reason I knew that was a cover is because there was like an MTV piece about it, because it was that was released with an Austin Powers movie. I want to say it's the second Austin Powers movie.
That makes sense.
And I remember like a pop-up video type thing, or like a TRL Carson Daly being like, "It's so crazy, he covered this band from 30 years ago." Like, but it was it's not his song.
That was a
but
perfect
he made
Carson
it his
Daly,
song.
by the way.
I watched the Today Show now. Yeah. I threw one on here. Sorry, one more self-indulgence.
Please,
so,
by all means.
So there's this Adam Sandler movie called Rain Over Me.
Yep.
I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I've seen it. I liked it very much, actually.
With Don Cheadle, right? Mm-hmm. I love that movie. Like, it is such a departure. And we've seen Adam Sandler do other stuff since. So, like, we all know it's there. But at that time, it was such a departure from what you think he is.
Right.
And he plays that character. It's so sad and it's so difficult. And, like, it's a very New York movie. But it featured this song performed either just by Eddie or by Pearl Jam proper, I'm not sure, called Love Reign Over Me. And it has an important part in the film, but also, like, it's just such a powerful performance.
Yes.
And I didn't know it was a Who song. Like, for some reason, I missed that growing up listening to The Who. Like, I'd never heard Love Reign Over Me. And I heard the original version on the radio sometime after that, and I was just like, "What? It's not Eddie Vedder.
No,
that's not Eddie Vedder."
And it's such a powerful song too. Like,
it is. And the Who version's incredible. Yeah,
they're both really good.
So take your pick. Go check out either of them. Go check out both of them. They're heavy,
good.
And that movie will make you cry, but it's a very good movie.
Probably the only Adam Sandler movie that I can just flat out recommend.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're Papa
Granted,
Gummy,
I haven't seen
Happy
Uncut
Gilmore.
Gems though.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
So now he's either doing those kinds of things that actually shock everybody because he actually can act.
Yeah.
But he's like,
Dynamic
nah, I'm
actor.
just gonna take all my friends to Maui and film the stupidest thing ever just to have a vacation for me and my pals.
We watched there was Murder Mystery with him and Jennifer Aniston, and I think we went in with such low expectations that we walked out feeling pretty good about it. Like, it's on Netflix or whatever, and we were like, this is going to be bad. And it was mediocre.
It wasn't
and I was
as
like,
bad.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, it wasn't as bad. It wasn't as bad. And they made a second one, apparently.
Maybe that's why these movies like Reign Over Me and Uncut Gems, like, everyone's like, wow, Adam Sandler's amazing. Yeah. Maybe he's not amazing. Maybe it's just that much better than what we would expect.
Maybe. I mean,
he's just a middle of the road actor, perhaps. And when he's not acting like a buffoon, it's actually halfway decent.
Yeah.
And I'm spitballing here.
Yeah. Well, so there's one other movie of his, not that we're turning this into film logic, but Punch Drunk Love is one that, I'm not the biggest Paul Thomas Anderson nut. I know that those are like the highbrow film people adore him. I haven't really seen Boogie Nights or any of that stuff, but him in Punch Drunk Love is also amazing. So if you liked Reign Over Me and you haven't seen Punch Drunk Love, you should. That's one checking out. It's intense and it's weird, but it's a really really good Adam Sandler.
I literally can't remember if I've seen that or not, but
you should check it out.
Right, getting to the end here.
Yeah, two more just very contemporary ones that I tossed on here. Again, I just don't know. Now we're getting to the point where people who are listening to this music are in their 20s, and some of this music was released before they were born, or maybe even before their parents were born. Mm-hmm. So Lana Del Rey puts out probably her best album of recent years, called Norman Effing Rockwell, back in 2019, and leads it with this cover of Sublime's Do in Time that does really well. I mean, like, gets a bunch of radio play, streams are crazy on it, and I just don't know if people knew that was a Sublime song, you know? Like, I didn't see a whole lot of coverage talking or amplifying the fact that she led with a cover song.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
But it's a good one. And then Måneskin, this like awesome, I don't know if you're familiar with them much. But
my Italian brethren being weird, as we like to do.
They are so awesome. That band, they're just like living rock stars in a new era of like I don't know how this band exists right now, you know.
Good for them.
But they're fantastic. Just these young 20-something-year-olds who are just killing it. And they break through on this massive Eurovision competition.
Yep.
And they play a cover of Beggin', a semi-obscure. Like it was a big enough song, but it's not like the song you think of when you think of the Four Seasons. They do this like gritty glam rock version of Beggin' by Frankie Valli, and it is so good.
I know the song, but I had no idea it was a cover.
Yeah, right? It doesn't feel like it.
No.
It feels like, because they owned it enough to crank it up, you know? Like,
wow.
Yeah.
So this one may actually be our biggest gap between the original. I thought it was going to be Bjork. From
67 to
51
21
to 95, because that's what, 44 years.
Yeah.
So this has that beat, 67 to 2021. I think this is our winner for the biggest gap between the original and the cover. So good one to end on. I need to listen to Måneskin more. It's just so.
They have a song called Supermodel that was like a recent song, original, that is very good. That will just get in your ears. And they did another cover. They've done 3 covers, actually, which is, it does kind of make you worry a little bit. They did I Wanna Be Your Dog, which is a Stooges cover. They did it with Iggy Pop, I believe, though. And then... what's the song on that Elvis movie that came out last year? I want to say it's If I Had a Dream or If I Could Dream or something to that effect. But they did an Elvis cover for the Elvis movie, and it was very good. But again, I'm like, man, you don't want to just be the cover band, right?
No, if you're doing it for a movie, it doesn't count.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
I think they're bigger than that, though.
I think so too.
They did if you win Eurovision.
Yeah, and also like a lot of that kind of stuff. Granted, like it's very different from, say, America's Got Talent or or American Idol or The Voice, where that's almost predominantly covers. I mean, like pretty much everything in American Idol and The Voice are, some people do original works on there, but it's a lot of covers. So it's natural that an artist that comes out of the kind of American churn of those music shows would come out doing covers. Europe, it doesn't happen as much, but yeah, no, they've had a bunch of other original songs that have charted, done really well, and they've got a good body of work, and they just put an album out recently, and it's very good.
Awesome. Yeah. So there are so many that we could talk about, and it's like we're like coming up on 2 hours. So
we can leave it there.
But so I guess maybe to wrap up, do you have any? And maybe it's one that we talked about, maybe it's not. But is there a cover that is just one of your favorite songs that you will die on that hill that it's better than the original, despite the original being amazing?
Yeah. So I think years ago, it's going to be off the same album. Years ago, it would have been Turn the Page. But I have come to appreciate Bob Seger in my latest years. That I think that the Bob Seger version might be better. I like the Metallica grit, but I think I gel more with the Seeger spirit of the song.
There you go.
But Whiskey in the Jar is so fun the way Metallica does it. It's fun. The original version by Thin Lizzy, I believe, is also very good. But Metallica's Whiskey in the Jar is just I could listen to that whenever.
Well, it has to be a good enough original that it's hard to pick.
Yeah.
And
also, my grandma got me Metallica's Garage Inc. for Easter when it came out. Because, like, I was, like, not sure what to ask people for Easter.
That's such a strange Easter gift.
Dude, I got Aerosmith's A Little South of Sanity double disc live album for Easter. I got Everclear's So Much for the Afterglow for Easter. I was like, I was in my music, and I was like, aunts, uncles, grandparents, get me CDs.
For
like,
Easter?
just yeah. I had a whole breakdown.
Like,
yeah,
literally, all I would get was like chocolate and quarters.
Oh man, I got to get an Easter present from my grandparents.
I never had that happen. I mean, I got plenty of CDs for my birthday and Christmas, but like, no, for Easter we got candy.
I just think about my grandma, like how she or my grandpa got that CD. Like, to this day, still tickles me because there was no internet. They didn't.
Yeah.
Can I get the Metallica garage out?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's amazing. And then I asked the question selfishly because I needed an excuse.
What about you? Yeah.
I needed an excuse to talk about Across the Universe by Fiona Apple. So Fiona Apple does a version of the Beatles Across the Universe, and this is a huge like. I'm gonna get like
do it
hate mail for saying that I enjoy the Fiona Apple version better than the Beatles version. But
guys, the Beatles are fine. Everybody loves them. Don't worry about
the Beatles. But she did this for the Pleasantville soundtrack, a movie that came out in '98, and it's so good. If you're any level of Fiona Apple fan or even Beatles fan, and you just enjoy a good like journey of a tune, oh my God, Across the Universe by Fiona Apple might be my favorite cover song ever.
Wow.
And
better than Alien Ant Farm's Smooth Criminal.
I like that one. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I got to see Alien Ant Farm perform live in the weirdest setting possible. They closed out the GameStop managers conference in Dallas at some hotel. And it was so weird, and I enjoyed it. I liked them. They played Smooth Criminal.
My favorite.
It was so weird.
Wow, dude.
Because it was at the end of this weird 3-day, managers conference. I had gotten no sleep because I was on a cot in a hotel room with a stranger, and the alarm, the like smoke alarm, kept going off all night for some unknown reason. So I was dead tired. Had to, just come off of basically a miniature E3. Seeing all these new games, playing Super Mario Galaxy 6 months before it would come to retail.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, like, the conference is over, and they're like, and now we have Alien Ant Farm to perform for you guys. And I'm like, what is going on?
What is happening?
Is this a fever dream that I'm having right now?
Yeah.
But no, that's a dope cover.
It is. It's a fun cover. Was this at like a convention center?
It was at a hotel. It was like they
performed in the hotel.
Well, it was like the big, the convention was where we were like, hundreds of GameStop managers from across the country convened for the conference and would have meals together. And it was so weird. It was one of the weirdest experiences of my life.
I love this so much. It's got to be something that you look back at and you're like, I'm sure that this happened, but there's a part of me that questions whether it actually happened. Right?
I need to find some other folks. I probably could track down. I'm trying to think.
No,
I
believe
must know
you.
a few of the dudes that were there. I've got to still know how to get. Yeah, I'll have to confirm.
Alien Ant Farm performing at the regional GameStop managers convention checks out in my head. It just feels like the kind of thing where you're like, did it?
Hold on, let me. That's what it felt like at the time. Yeah. It could have been just completely. Okay, yeah, I just Googled it. It definitely happened. There's like a Neo Gaming Age forum thread about it.
That's so fun.
Yep. It happened. It was not a fever dream. Dude. Anyway, that's awesome. A great way to wrap up this amazingly fun, oftentimes strange, but overall enjoyable discussion.
What covers are.
Yeah, exactly. You never know what's going to happen. It's like, did I hear this song before? Am I dreaming? What is going on? And then you have to Google it to find the truth, which you didn't used to be able to do, like when we started listening to music in the 90s. So,
yeah.
What's your favorite cover song? Let us know on Twitter at RetroGroove_. Go ahead.
Everybody should Google Nothing Compares to You, Chris Cornell. Because he does an incredible cover of that song, which I don't know if he's covering Sinead O'Connor or he's covering Prince, but there's an Inception level on that of
incredible
of who's no longer with us, and Chris Cornell's his voice on that song is just amazing. Sorry, at RetroGroove_pod.
At RetroGroove_pod. That reminds me, I went down a Chris Cornell rabbit hole on YouTube, and I found a live performance of Linkin Park singing, what's the name of the song?
Black Hole Sun?
Crawling. No, it was a Linkin Park song.
It was a Linkin Park song. Crawling.
Yeah, but then Chris Cornell surprises everyone and comes out and does the second verse. He does the second verse, and then they harmonize on the chorus, and like it's mind blowing. So we might have to do an episode on like that kind of thing, which would be more difficult to research, but I think that would be worth.
Yeah, for sure. Doing. Can you post that in the Discord? Because I need to see that.
I can find
heavy.
It's really good. It's like because they're totally different sonically, with their tonality of their voice, but the way that Chris makes it work with his harmony to Chester's like main vocal that he doesn't change from the original.
Yeah.
And I'm not even really a Linkin Park fan, but I was like, my mind was blown. Anyway, that's not a cover song, but it's a good segue into a potential future episode of Retro Groove.
I like that.
Where we discuss what guest appearances that blow your mind. That sounds like a fun episode. I like that idea.
Sounds like a really good idea. Okay, good job.
But this was awesome. I had so much fun. This is one of the most fun episodes, at least in my opinion, that we've done.
And there'll be a great playlist for it too.
Oh, this is going to be such a dope playlist. I can't wait to start piecing this playlist together. Anyway, but thank you, Liam, for having such an incredibly fun discussion with me. Thank you, listener, for listening to Retro Groove. Once again, you can find us on Twitter at RetroGroove_pod. We're part of the Retro Logic family of podcasts. You can find us on Discord, on the Retro Logic server. We're so happy to have you listening along with us and having fun, talking about these fun, silly music topics with us. And we hope that you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.